Beginning and Advanced Reading Instruction. The roadmap for this CAP will provide an overview of both beginning and advanced reading instruction for all grade levels. Once students have attained alphabetic principle, meaning they recognize there are sounds and letters and a system for using them, they are ready to move on to reading. Students at risk or who have disabilities, as well as English learners in general and special education, need a systematic and explicit phonics approach in order to read regular words accurately and fluently. We will discuss in class the systematic approach more in detail. When beginning letter-sound correspondence, you should first teach students in all lowercase letters. Uppercase should be introduced when students have 100% accuracy on lowercase letters. Students will first read CVC or consonant-vowel-consonant words such as mat or sit. They will then learn a small number of irregular, high-frequency exception words needed to read short sentences. The and have are two examples of irregular, high-frequency exception words. Students will then move on to decodable books. Decodable books are those in which 70% or more of the words can be sounded out. This gives students a chance to sound out words, read connected text, scan words from left to right, moving from word to word, learning how punctuation marks affect meaning, and answering comprehension questions. Next comes reading regular words. There are 3 parts to the format for reading regular words. In Part 1, students sound out each word orally before reading it as a whole word, receiving support from the teacher as needed. In Part 2, students continue to sound out the words, but do so subvocally in their heads. In Part 3, sounding out is at an automatic level where students read regular words by sight without being conscious of sounding them out. Part 1, sounding out orally. As soon as students have learned 6 to 8 letter sounds and 1 or 2 common vowel sounds, instruction in sounding out one-syllable words should begin. These are the 5 best practices for teaching oral sounding out. Provide more time as needed for teaching difficult skills to mastery. Move at your students' pace, not at the pace of a curriculum guide. Avoid adding schwads, that extra vowel sound, to the end of letter sounds. Match think time to the difficulty of the task. If you don't allow students time to process what word they just read, only your best students will respond to the question when you ask, "What word is that?" When students are successfully sounding out new words, reduce scaffolding and phase out the modeling guided practice steps of instruction. Part 2, sounding out words subvocally. When students are able to sound out the words for the day with 100% accuracy, move on to Part 2 instruction, or reading words in their heads. 3 best practices for teaching subvocal sounding out are: 1. Watch students' eye movements. Be sure they're moving left to right and bring them back to the word if their eyes wander. 2. When students are able to sound out new words with 100% accuracy, remove the modeling and guided practice phase of instruction. 3. When students are able to subvocally sound out words without help, add reading words fast to your regular intervention instructional time. Part 3 of teaching beginning reading is reading words by sight. Once students are able to read some nonsense words by sight, add Part 3 to instruction. Students read words by sight, sounding out on an automatic level. It is not visual memorization, but the automaticity of sounding out words. Having students begin this before they are ready risk having students memorize visual forms of words. The 3 best practices for teaching reading words by sight are: 1. Use assessment to guide your teaching. Both formative assessments and progress monitoring should be used to guide instruction of new words. 2. Gradually decrease think time as students read words correctly before asking, "What word?" 3. Pre-plan by using the optional step for difficult words. When you're introducing new words, such as the word strum, that students may have difficulty with because they're less common, step back and use a modeling, guided practice, independent practice format. Students with disabilities need extra instruction in reading exception words. The 3 tips for teaching exception words are: 1. Avoid teaching similar exception words together, such as where and were. 2. Attach meaning by saying a clear sentence after abstract exception words. For example, when teaching students the word would, W-O-U-L-D, I would like to have some chocolate ice cream. Would. 3. Provide multiple opportunities to practice exception words. One such activity is to affirm the list. When students learn a list of new exception words, they often forget the ones at the start of the list. Affirming the list is reading each new word and going back and rereading the earlier words each time. This will help with long-term memory. Other ideas for practicing exception words include reading new words several times, spelling the word so the letter-sound associations strengthen the word in memory, connect the word to meaning when first introduced, and connect the word to meaning in a short text shortly after the word lesson. Reading decodable sentences is the next step in teaching reading. Once students can sound out a number of regular words and know a few exception words, they can begin reading sentences. This is best done in the modeling, guided practice, and independent practice routine until students are competent enough for you to phase out the first two supported steps. From the time your students begin to read sentences, basic comprehension questions should follow reading. This will help students learn to actively think about what they are reading. To maximize instructional time and success, it is imperative at this level that students are only reading text at their independent reading level, meaning with 97% or higher accuracy. Once students are able to competently read words and short sentences, it's time to transition to reading passages. There are 3 tips for transitioning from words to passages. Tip 1. Pacing will initially be very slow so that students can learn to follow signals regarding following with their fingers and turning pages of books. Tip 2. Take time to teach students to follow text with the pointer finger of their dominant hand, no matter if they are listening to someone else read or reading themselves. And tip 3. Teach new vocabulary explicitly, either before reading or as you read. There are 2 approaches to teaching advanced reading skills. The first of these is the word part approach, where students are taught the different prefixes, suffixes, etc. And the second is the syllable approach, where students are taught the 6 syllable types in the English language. The syllable approach, because of its complexity, may be better suited for older learners. If this approach is used, be sure students understand syllabication first and teach those skills explicitly if they don't. The recommended method for advanced word reading instruction consists of teaching students to 1. Decode letter combinations such as digraphs and diphthongs. These letter combinations include AI, AL, AR, AU, AW, AY, and CH, among others. Number 2. Teach students structural analysis. This is the ability to identify affixes, suffixes, and base words. 3. Exceptional multi-syllable words can be taught much like beginning reading. Show the word, model the word, spell the word, and then repeat the word. And number 4, it is also important to teach the 3 endings of the sound ed or ed. In terms of older learners, many of them lack necessary decoding skills necessary to be fluent readers. They have established their own patterns of guessing at words that will be difficult to break, but it can be done with persistent intervention. While teaching these students basic phonics may seem babyish to them, the only productive option is to step back and teach phonemic awareness, letter sound skills, regular word reading skills, and passage reading skills. 3 evidence-based programs that are geared to older learners are Corrective Reading, Language Exclamation Mark, and Wilson Reading System. Programs such as these are intended to be taught 1.5 to 2 hours per day. Computer-assisted instruction is another option for these students that we will discuss more in class. So to wrap up, this podcast detailed systematic beginning and advanced reading instruction. There are 3 parts to the format for reading regular words. In Part 1, students sound out each word orally before reading it as a whole word. Receiving support from the teacher is needed. In Part 2, students continue to sound out the words, but do so subvocally in their heads. In Part 3, sounding out an automatic level where students read regular words by sight without being conscious of sounding them out. There are two approaches to teaching advanced reading skills. The first of these is the word part approach, where students are taught the different prefixes, suffixes, etc., and the second is the syllable approach, where students are taught the 6 syllable types in the English language. The next cap in this teaching reading series addresses fluency, the next step in reading instruction.